Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be looking at Jesus raising the dead in our continuing survey of the life of Christ. John chapter 11, verse 1 starts off, "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany." Lazarus was a Hebrew name. Actually, it's a Greek rendition of that Hebrew name. We say Eliezer, and you shorten that to Lazarus. He was Lazarus of Bethany. Bethany is just over the hill from Jerusalem. And this was the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, they haven't been mentioned earlier. They're going to be seen in this passage, but perhaps John mentions them, well, first of all, because they're going to be seen in this passage, but also because they're seen in some of the other gospel accounts, and John suspects you might have read or heard of those as well. Now, here we are. Notice we're in Jerusalem. And Jericho would be way over 18 miles downhill. But as you crest the Mount of Olives, going east from Jerusalem, you come to this little town, and it is, even today, it's still a little town. It was even smaller back then, this little town known as Bethany. And it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet. Now, we haven't read about that. That's going to be presented in the next chapter. But, like I said, John already assumes that maybe you've heard the story. And so he mentions it now. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, "Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick." You know, because Lazarus, because of this reference, he who you love, Martin Luther, for one, thought maybe that the writer of this fourth gospel was Lazarus himself. I don't think so, because Jesus loved a number of people, but one of the people that Jesus loved was this man Lazarus. Verse 4, "But when Jesus heard this, he said, 'The sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it.'" So, you know, when you heard someone was sick, remember, they didn't have hospitals and doctors back then, easy medical care. So, sickness could be a life-threatening thing. And yet Jesus says it's not going to end in death. Now, he doesn't say he's not going to die. He actually will. But it won't end there. But it will be the end of this, the result of this, will be for the glory of God. And remember how this goes back to the previous chapter where we saw a man that was born blind, not because he had sinned, not because his parents had sinned, but that God may be glorified. And here the sickness and even the death of Lazarus is going to take place for the same reason. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. These were three very close friends of Jesus. Verse 6, "So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." So instead of, I have a background in emergency response. I used to work in my younger years as an officer in the fire department, and we had medical units, and we had emergencies, and we would go code 3 to an emergency, and lights and sirens blazing. And especially when somebody was on the point of death, we'd go in a hurry. And here, Jesus, he's sick, and instead of going in a hurry, Jesus stays where he is for 2 days. Verse 7, "Then after this, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go to Judea,'" again, because Bethany is in Judea, so now Jesus takes the long journey back down to that area. "The disciples said to him, 'Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. And are you going there again?' That's a dangerous place to be." Verse 9, Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world." Remember how Jesus had spoken in a couple of chapters earlier about the light, back in chapter 8 and again in chapter 9. He's still on that theme. "But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." This he said, and after that he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep." The disciples don't get that. The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he's fallen asleep, then that's good. He'll recover. Sleep is good for you. You heal by sleeping." Jesus had spoken of his death. He had used what we call a euphemism, speaking in a non-literal way. But they thought he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus said to them plainly, now he makes it really obvious, "Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, because if he was there, he would have healed him, but he wasn't there, so that you may believe. And this chapter takes place so the disciples may believe, but this chapter also takes place so that you, the hearer, the reader of this book, also believe. So Jesus says, but let us go to him. Therefore, Thomas, who was called Didymus. Now we're going to read more about Thomas when we get to chapter 20. Thomas, we're going to know him as Doubting Thomas. But here I see another side of Thomas, not so much doubt. Well, maybe there is a little bit of doubt, but I see the loyalty of Thomas. Thomas, who is called Didymus, the word Didymus actually means twin. I don't know who his twin was, but that was his nickname, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Because Judea is a dangerous place. You go there, you might die, and if Jesus is going, then let's go die with him. Not much faith, but a lot of loyalty. John chapter 11 then. We start off as we are preparing for the miracle, and Jesus had been away. And when we get now to verse 17, we're going to see Jesus. He's going to arrive on scene, and he'll actually perform a miracle. He's going. You know the story. He's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. That's what takes place in Bethany. And then the last part of the chapter, we will see the results of the miracle. The camera is going to shift to Jerusalem, and we will see there what the Jewish authorities make of that miracle and what they determine to do about it. So this scene is played out in 4 parts, although the 2 central parts are going to take place in Bethany. Well, here we are in Bethany. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. That is Lazarus. He's died. And not only is he dead, he's dead and buried. He'd been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, you have to understand a little something about the Jewish customs. What they would do at this time in history, they would take somebody who had died, and they would put him in a tomb. If he was fairly well-to-do, it would be a cave that was cut off. If less so, maybe just a trench with a stone over him. But they would place him there, especially in the richer tombs, in a cave, and they would seal it up for about a year. And then after a year, they would go in. By this time, they didn't treat the body with preservatives or anything like that. The body would have decomposed, and they would gather up the bones and place them into an ossuary, one of these stone boxes. And we found bunches of these. In fact, these are some of those ossuaries that were found on the Mount of Olives, just over the hill from Bethany. And they would be placed there so that their bones would rest in peace. Well, here Lazarus has already been in the tomb 4 days. The body's already starting to decompose. And Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So here we are, we're at Bethany, just over the hill from Jerusalem. And Martha there, when she had heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. So Jesus is on his way. The news reaches both of them that Jesus is arriving. Martha's always the movement one. She's always the proactive one. Remember how she was, we saw her earlier, preparing dinner while Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. Here Martha's going out to meet Jesus. And Mary, well, she's just staying in the house. And Martha then said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, if you had gotten here on time, if you had done what we call in the rescue world a code 3 response, my brother would not have died. But notice her faith goes beyond this. Verse 22, even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Martha believes it's not too late. And in answer to her faith, Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Martha has her theology correct. She knows there's a future resurrection, and one of these days, someday in the future, Lazarus would rise again. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection. She was looking forward to a future resurrection. She's not wrong in that. But Jesus says, he points to the present. And he points to himself. And he says, I am the resurrection, and I am the life. And he who believes in me will live even if he does die. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Here's Jesus at the aftermath of a funeral. You wonder sometimes what Jesus would say at a funeral. And Jesus points to himself. He points to himself. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. And he who believes in me shall live. And he will live even if he dies. But notice the rest of these clauses, because they're given in parallel. We saw he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me, because that's a central part of approaching that life, everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die, because I'm the resurrection and the life. So we come full circle, pointing to him and pointing to the one who brings life, who brings eternal life. And she said to him, Yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world, the promised one, the Messiah, the Son of God. And she believes all that he has said about himself. When she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, it's interesting that she says it in secret, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, Mary hears the news, she got up quickly and was coming to him. So Martha's already been there, and she went and got Mary, and now Mary comes. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him, presumably on the road to the village. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her. So the entire party, if we can call it that, the entire group moves, relocates from the house where they had been there for mourning, for weeping. They leave, they follow Mary, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. They figure, well, time to go to the tomb, time to weep at the tomb. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, mind you, there's a whole crowd that's there as well, that's following. When Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That's the same thing that Martha had said earlier. And she echoes the same words. If only you had been here, but she does not add the additional words that Martha adds. Remember, Martha had said, even now, whatever you ask, God can do. She's just looking at the past. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Remember how he had said to his disciples way back in John chapter 1, where he said, what are you looking for? And they said, where are you staying? And he says, come and see. And now they say to him, come and see. And he comes with them. And Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible right there. Jesus wept. Why did he weep? I think he wept because of the loss that they were feeling. Because Mary was weeping, and Martha perhaps had been weeping, and the people were weeping, and he wept with them. But also I think he wept because death is a great enemy that steals away our beloved. And the Jews they were saying, see how he loved him. Which he did. He wept because he loved his departed brother Lazarus. But some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man also from dying? Couldn't it have been different? Couldn't it have been prevented? So Jesus, again, being deeply moved within, he came to the tomb. Now, it was a cave. It was one of those higher class tombs. And a stone was lying against the cave to keep out predators, to keep out animals. This would be customary. And Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha says, there's a problem. It's been 4 days. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench. For he has been dead 4 days. Remember, they didn't use preservatives. They had no refrigeration. there's been a body decomposing for 4 days, and Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Didn't say anything about what you're going to smell, but you're going to see something. Just believe. So they removed the stone. And then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Remember what Martha had said? I believe that even if you ask the Father, he can give you. And sure enough, Jesus asked the Father, I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it, so that they may believe that you sent me. Jesus prays. Now, he's always been in prayer, and he knew that the Father already knew, but he prays out loud for their benefit and for your benefit and for my benefit, so that we can hear, so that we know that this just didn't happen. This was an act of God. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus heard. The men who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings. They would wrap the body and put it in spice and things like that. And the wrappings were still all in place. Sort of picture the mummy, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. That had to be, if you're already wrapped, and Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Get all those wrappings off of him. And they did that. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done believed in him. So the result of this was faith. But that was only one result. Verse 46 describes the other result. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. And that's going to lead to the other result. Therefore, the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council. And notice this council is made up of two groups, the chief priests and the Pharisees. And those are not groups that always talk nicely to each other. In fact, these are groups that very oftentimes were polarized on opposite sides of the theological fence. But here they get together and we're saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. It just is escalating. Verse 48, if we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. There is a political issue that's bringing these two diverse groups together. They are worried what might be the Roman response. They are trying to do the politically correct thing, and the politically correct thing will be the spiritually wrong thing. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now, you're supposed to be high priest for life. But in the case of Caiaphas, what had happened is the Romans had told his father-in-law, you can't be priest anymore. So he had appointed one of his sons, and then another of his sons, then another of his sons. Finally, he'd run out of sons. Now he had gone to his son-in-law, Caiaphas, and it was Caiaphas' turn to be the high priest. And Caiaphas, the high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man die for the people and the whole nation not perish. Caiaphas says, let's arrange a death, not of the whole nation, but just one man. That will be the politically correct thing to do. It's interesting that we have Caiaphas's ossuary. The ossuary, the bone box in which he eventually died. Now, he lived into his 60s. We know that both from Josephus, but also because the bones contained a man in his 60s. We could tell that. We have his ossuary. He eventually died just before the fall of Jerusalem. And he did not say this on his own initiative. Now, he thought he was saying this on his own initiative. He thinks he's just saying the politically correct thing. But being high priest that year, whether he realized it or not, he was prophesying. And he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. Do you see this? That sometimes somebody can prophesy, even though they're not from God, that God worked through him in his place, in the what do you call that? The position that he held, the position of high priest. God prophesies through him, even though he is against God. He's against Jesus. He prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but in order that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. Jesus came to die not just for the nation of Israel, Jesus came to die for the world, to make them all one, to make one people, those who were scattered abroad. And his death was prophesied. Such a death, a substitutionary atonement, was prophesied by the high priest unwittingly. Caiaphas did not even realize the greater truth of his own words. And yet he inadvertently gives credence and prophecy to Jesus of Nazareth, the one who would die for us. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. Therefore Jesus no longer continued to walk publicly among the Jews, but went away from there to the country near the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim. Now that's not Ephraim the tribe, that's a city by that name. And there he stayed with the disciples. And when he comes back, it will be coming back to Jerusalem to die.